Welcome to our channel, StoryLearn English. Today, we will listen a life-changing motivational story. It will help us to add inspiration to our lives and improve our English listening, speaking, and reading skills. Now, let's begin. The night before 2026 arrived was quiet in a way that felt heavier than silence. The clock kept moving forward, second by second, but inside the heart there was a strange pause, like life itself was holding its breath. Outside, fireworks were being tested in the distance, small bursts of light flashing and disappearing. But inside the room there was only one person, one mind, and a year full of memories that refused to stay buried. The year 2025 had not been kind. It had taken dreams and returned lessons, taken confidence and returned scars, taken hope and returned questions. There were moments when it felt like trying was useless, when every effort ended in disappointment, when the mirror reflected not strength but exhaustion. Failures replayed themselves like an unwanted movie, missed chances, broken promises to oneself, words never spoken, actions never taken. Fear had become familiar, almost comfortable, like an old companion that whispered reasons to stay small, to stay safe, to stay exactly where life felt limited but predictable. As midnight approached, a thought appeared quietly, not loud or dramatic, but steady and clear. If nothing changes, nothing will change. That thought didn't judge, didn't accuse, didn't shout. It simply stated the truth. The past could not be rewritten, but the future was still blank, still waiting. The calendar was about to turn, but a year changing on paper meant nothing unless something changed inside. And in that moment, sitting alone with the weight of yesterday and the uncertainty of tomorrow, a decision was made. Not a loud promise, not a dramatic vow, but a calm, serious decision to stop living on autopilot. 2026 arrived without asking for permission. The clock struck 12, fireworks filled the sky, messages poured into phones, people celebrated. But something else happened quietly and invisibly. A line was drawn, not between success and failure, not between rich and poor, not between lucky and unlucky, but between the old way of living and a new way of thinking. The new year did not bring instant motivation or sudden confidence. The fears were still there, the doubts were still there, the past was still heavy, but there was one difference: the willingness to move forward even while carrying all of it. The first days of 2026 were ordinary. No miracles happened. No overnight success arrived. The world did not change its rules. But small things began to shift. Waking up 10 minutes earlier, drinking water instead of scrolling endlessly, writing thoughts instead of suppressing them, choosing effort over excuses even when motivation was missing. These actions felt insignificant at first, almost embarrassing in their simplicity. But consistency has a quiet power. It doesn't announce itself, it just keeps showing up. There were days when the old voice returned, reminding of past failures, comparing progress to others, and asking why it was taking so long. On those days, the temptation to quit was strong, but quitting no longer felt comfortable. It felt familiar, yes, but familiarity had not led anywhere worth going. So instead of quitting, there was reflection. Instead of self-hate, there was self-awareness. Instead of pretending everything was fine, there was honesty. Growth didn't come from pretending to be strong. It came from admitting weakness and moving anyway. As weeks passed, the mind slowly began to change, not into blind optimism, but into grounded belief. The belief that progress is not loud. The belief that discipline is more reliable than motivation. The belief that life rewards those who continue even when results are invisible.
The past no longer felt like a prison. It started to feel like a teacher. Every mistake carried a lesson. Every failure carried information. Every painful memory pointed toward a better choice. People around began to notice subtle differences, not dramatic success, not flashy results, but energy, focus, calm, a different way of responding to problems. The same challenges still appeared, but reactions were different. Instead of panic, there was planning. Instead of avoidance, there was action. Instead of blaming the world, there was responsibility. And responsibility, once feared, became empowering, because taking responsibility meant having control. There were setbacks, of course, days when discipline broke, moments when old habits returned, times when progress felt reversed. But instead of seeing these moments as proof of failure, they were seen as part of the process. Falling no longer meant stopping. Falling meant learning how to stand up faster. Self-respect grew not from perfection, but from persistence. Midway through the year, something important became clear. The goal was never to become someone else. The goal was to become honest, consistent, and aligned. To live in a way where words matched actions, where dreams matched effort, where values matched daily behavior. Success was no longer defined only by money or recognition, but by peace of mind, self-trust, and growth. Fear didn't disappear in 2026. It simply lost control. It still whispered, but it no longer decided. Doubt still visited, but it no longer stayed. Confidence wasn't loud. It was quiet and steady. It showed up in small promises kept, in routines respected, in boundaries protected. Life didn't become perfect, but it became purposeful. By the time the end of the year approached, looking back felt different, not because everything went right, but because nothing was wasted. Every struggle had shaped something stronger. Every delay had taught patience. Every failure had built resilience. The person standing at the end of 2026 was not fearless, not flawless, not finished, but aware, disciplined, and moving forward. And the most powerful realization of all was this: changing your life doesn't happen in one day, one decision, or one year. It happens the moment you stop waiting for the perfect time and start choosing growth again and again, even when it's hard, even when it's slow, even when no one is watching. 2026 didn't magically change life, but it became the year life finally started changing.
The days that followed continued to unfold with a quiet honesty that had once been missing. Life did not suddenly become easier, but it became clearer. Each morning carried a small reminder that growth was a daily choice, not a one-time decision made at midnight on New Year's Eve. There were moments when the past still tried to pull the mind backward, replaying old scenes like unfinished conversations. But now, instead of getting trapped in regret, there was reflection. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" the question became, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift alone changed everything. The body began to feel different, too. Energy returned slowly, not in sudden bursts, but in steady waves. Sleep improved, focus sharpened. The mind, once crowded with noise and comparison, started finding space. That space allowed ideas to grow, ideas that had been buried under fear for years. Dreams that once felt unrealistic now felt distant but possible, and possible was enough to keep going. There were still people who doubted. Some laughed quietly, some openly questioned the changes. They were used to the old version, the one who talked more than acted, who started and stopped, who dreamed but hesitated. But 2026 wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. It was about proving something to oneself. For the first time, validation from outside mattered less than respect from within. Challenges appeared in new forms. Success, even small success, brought its own pressure.
The fear of losing progress, the fear of failing again, the fear of disappointing oneself. But those fears were different now. They didn't paralyze, they sharpened awareness. They encouraged preparation instead of avoidance. They demanded growth instead of comfort. There were moments of loneliness, too. Growth can be isolating. When routines change, when priorities shift, when excuses are no longer welcome, some connections naturally fade. At first, that loneliness hurt, but over time, it became peaceful. Solitude turned into a place for thinking, planning, healing. Silence stopped feeling empty and started feeling full. As months passed, discipline became identity. It wasn't forced anymore, it was natural. The mind learned to do what needed to be done even when emotions resisted. And emotions, once enemies, became signals instead. Sadness meant rest was needed. Frustration meant adjustment was required. Excitement meant direction was right. Nothing was ignored. Everything was understood. The year tested commitment more than motivation. Motivation came and went like weather, but commitment stayed. On days when nothing seemed to work, commitment whispered, "Show up anyway." And showing up, even imperfectly, kept momentum alive. Momentum, once fragile, became unstoppable. Opportunities appeared, not as luck, but as results. Doors opened because preparation met timing. Conversations changed because confidence changed. Decisions improved because clarity improved. And slowly, life began to reflect the internal work that had been done in silence. Toward the later part of 2026, reflection felt different than it had at the start. The question was no longer, "Can I change?" It became, "How far can I go?" The past no longer defined identity, it provided contrast. Looking back didn't bring pain anymore, it brought pride, not for achievements, but for endurance. The most surprising lesson of 2026 was realizing that self-belief is built, not discovered. It is built in early mornings, in hard choices, in staying consistent when no reward is visible. It is built when quitting would be easier, when excuses would be justified, when comfort would be tempting. Every time the harder choice was made, self-belief grew stronger. As the year slowly approached its end, there was no fear of time passing. There was gratitude. Gratitude for growth, for lessons, for the version of self that refused to give up. The mirror now reflected someone familiar but transformed, not in appearance, but in presence. The eyes carried calm, the posture carried confidence, the silence carried strength. And in the final days of 2026, there was no dramatic celebration, no loud announcement of success, just a quiet understanding. Life had changed because the way of living had changed. The journey was far from over, but the direction was finally right. The future no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like something to build. And that is how life changes, not through wishes, not through waiting, not through perfect plans, but through daily choices, honest effort, and the courage to begin again every single day.
As the final days of the year settled in, the air itself felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because the way it was being experienced had transformed. Time slowed in a gentle way. Moments were no longer rushed or ignored. Each breath carried awareness. Each step carried intention. The person who once waited for life to improve had quietly become the person who improved life by showing up for it. There were evenings spent looking out at the sky, watching the light fade, realizing how far the mind had traveled, even if the body had not gone anywhere remarkable. The greatest distance covered in 2026 was internal, from self-doubt to self-trust, from fear to courage, from excuses to responsibility. And that journey, unlike any external achievement, could never be taken away. The scars from the past were still there, but they no longer hurt. They had become reminders, not of weakness, but of survival.
Each scar told a story of a moment when giving up felt easier than continuing, and yet continuing was chosen. The pain that once felt meaningless now had purpose. It had shaped patience. It had built empathy. It had created strength that did not need to prove itself. There was a quiet joy in simple things now. Morning light through a window, the sound of pages turning, the satisfaction of completing a task honestly, the peace of sleeping without regret. Happiness was no longer chased, it appeared naturally in moments of alignment. Life did not feel perfect, but it felt real, and real was better than perfect had ever been. The future was still uncertain, as it always is, but uncertainty no longer felt threatening. It felt open, like an unwritten page waiting for steady hands and honest words. Plans were made, but attachment to outcomes softened. Effort mattered more than results. Growth mattered more than speed. Integrity mattered more than applause. On the final night of the year, there was no long list of resolutions, no desperate promises, just gratitude. Gratitude for not giving up when quitting felt logical. Gratitude for learning when failing felt humiliating. Gratitude for becoming someone who could be trusted by their own reflection. The clock moved toward midnight once again, just as it had a year before. But this time there was no heavy heart, no desperate hope for rescue. There was calm confidence, the understanding that whatever came next could be handled, not because everything would go right, but because the mindset was right. When the year finally ended, it didn't feel like an ending at all. It felt like a continuation, a steady walk forward rather than a sudden leap. And in that quiet moment, one truth stood taller than all others. Changing your life is not about changing everything at once. It is about changing yourself enough that everything else eventually follows. 2026 became the year when waiting stopped and living began. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly, consistently, and courageously. And that made all the difference. Thank you for spending these moments with me. If this story inspired you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more stories.